my osteoarthritis clinic that I go to, which is just one of the many side effects of taking wrong sex hormones, is getting osteoporosis, osteoarthritis, and several other bone and skeletal issues. But there's a 16-year-old girl that goes there that can't walk without 2 canes because she went to a doctor that put her on wrong sex hormones when she was 12 years old, and it took just a few years for those poisons to destroy her bones and her bone growth, her bone development, and not only that, but to also thin them out. So now she's frail, and she's not even an adult yet. And so it's heartbreaking to see that how this is playing out and how the agenda is being pushed, and how everyone is saying, I mean, even within the lgbTQ movement, right? There's a big, huge split. They have people who say they're just LGB. They want nothing to do with the TQ, and it's just like a lot of infighting within that movement alone. And this is because everybody is starting to pay attention and see that there is an agenda, that this is being pushed and promoted and encouraged and celebrated. And in the meantime, it's destroying lives. I mean, I look at some of the young people that are detransitioning now, like Chloe Cole, and my heart breaks for them because they had no idea. They were completely bamboozled. I think what people need to focus on is not about what they want to do. It's about a mental disorder. So if somebody has a mental disorder, if they have an abnormal condition of mental confusion about their own sex, does that mean that they are, even as an adult, capable of making the decision or the choices to alter and basically destroy their bodies and just push themselves deeper and deeper into depression and suicidal ideation and all other medical issues that come along with taking these poisons?
You draw a distinction between gender, which he says is a social construct, and sexuality or sex, which is a biological term.
Well, gender and sex have always been used together to mean basically the same thing. This whole ideology or ideation of gender as a social construct was not created by but coined by a man named Dr. John Money. And Dr. John Money did horrific experiments on children. And he was not just a pedophile, but a pedo apologist. And so he's the one that coined the term gender identity. But the whole ideology of gender in the way that it's seen now or taught to people, that it's about an identity, and you can have a sex, but you can also have a gender identity. It's just complete. It's part of this agenda of, it wouldn't be called deception if we knew we were being deceived. And so just because you have some scientists or some medical doctors that say this is a thing, doesn't mean that it's true. It's, my thing is always dig deep on both sides, and then somewhere in the middle you're going to find the truth.
How can a very, very, very small majority of the population push an agenda? How can they be such a big issue when they're so small of a group?
So I did hear that. So yeah, I heard that one. So why do you believe that is such a small population? Because I go to the mall and I can see probably 30 out of 50 people that there's something going on with them. They have red hair, blue hair, pink hair, purple hair. They have earrings through their nose. They are trying to look androgynous. I see men in women's clothing. I see men wearing fingernail polish. I see women with scruff on, with hair on their face. I see all of this stuff everywhere I go across this nation. And so I don't believe that it is such a small population as if we were to Google it and it says like 4 to 7% of the population is this. I just believe that that's part of a greater agenda. I don't believe so. I don't believe it's a small population.
Question might be, or maybe a response. How would you respond to somebody who says, hey, you're just being transphobic, you're being homophobic, and let people alone, let them live their own lives? How would you respond to that?
Well, as an ex-gay and as an ex-trans or a detransitioner, I love them. And I love them to life because I want to see them healed. All right? Especially those that are involved in transgenderism. I want to see them healed before they destroy their mind, their body, and their soul with the poisons, wrong sex hormones, hormone reparative therapy, gender affirming care, with the procedures, with all of the things that are not meant for their bodies. I love them enough. And so I also happen to know that just because somebody puts phobia at the end of a word doesn't necessarily mean it's not propaganda. Homophobia, transphobia, Islamophobia, all of these things, they're propaganda. And I'm not saying that they don't exist. I'm not saying that there aren't people out there who hate on people or want to hurt people because of their choices in life, because there are. But what I'm saying is, from my stand, personal life knowledge and experience, not just my own, but thousands of others that I have met and befriended and counseled and been witness to and witness with, as they actually were healed and cured of these things. So one of the things that really stands out in my life while I was trans-identified was, in my 20s, I went to New York City to get castrated, and I was hanging out with two post-operative transgenders. Both of them had the full surgery. I had known them for years, and I had always thought they were like the happiest, most content and secure people that I knew, and they were always smiling, and I just knew that, that's who I wanted to hang out with. When I was preparing myself to get castrated, I was kind of scared of that procedure. And we were sitting on a blanket on Coney Island in New York, and we were just talking about stuff. And one of them looked at me and he said, "Don't do it." And I said, "Don't do what?" And he said, "Listen, all of my life I thought that if I could just become a woman, I would find peace, joy, and happiness." He said, "Every time I didn't, I thought I would find it if I could just keep transitioning." He said, "Right now, I am legally and medically a woman. And I am more miserable now than in my entire life. I think of taking my life every day." And the other one looked at me and says, "You do not want to be us." He said, "When I go to get on the subway, every single time that subway train comes down the tracks, I think of just falling in front of it." He said, "When I'm driving, I think about driving into oncoming traffic." He said, "This is my life." He says, "And it's irreversible. I can't change it." And I tell you what, I went back to the hotel that I was staying at, and I remember just curling up into this ball on the bed and just bawling my eyes out because I was so distraught. Like, I thought the same thing. I thought if I kept going, if I would just go and go through with this, because my plans were to get castrated in New York, recover, go to Mexico, get implants, and then go to Thailand and get the full surgery. And back in my day, that's how it worked. But I just remember bawling my eyes out, thinking to myself, if this isn't going to bring me peace or joy or happiness or make me content, then what is my next step? What's next for me? Where do I go from here? Now, I didn't do it. I didn't go through with that procedure, but I did continue to live as a trans-identified person for many more years. And in that process, I was able to meet so many other people who struggled with depression, with brokenness, with trauma from being abused in their life, with suicidal ideation. And I was more aware of the issues within my own quote-unquote community. And I can just focus on the transgenderism. We're talking about destroying their bodies. We're talking about, one, never being able to have children, to give birth. Destroying their abilities, destroying their bone structure, halting their brain development, changing their brain structure, altering their moods, altering their anger, their thoughts, their feelings, their emotional investment. This is not just a game. It's not just something that we can just say, okay, I'm just gonna play make-believe with my brother who wants to be my sister because I just love him and I just want to be there for him, and yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to play make-believe with him as he destroys himself, as he ruins his body and destroys his mind. Sorry, I can't get behind that. I know that turmoil. I know that place. Everybody has a right to do whatever they want to themselves, to their own bodies. But I want people to know that when you have mental disorders and you have serious oppression that keeps you from making sound cognitive decisions and choices, then no, you shouldn't be permitted to destroy your mind, body, and your soul.
David, a question that I just did a quick debrief with the last class and all, and a student said that she felt that people are born gay and that that's just who they are. What's your response to that?
I agree. We're all born that way. So I'm a Christian, right? So I read the scriptures, and the scriptures tell me that we're all born into sin, and that we're all shaped in iniquity. And iniquity at its root means perversion. So we're all shaped in perversion. We're all born into sin. So for me, I was able to get my mind around being born that way, and that's why Jesus said to me through the scriptures to be born again. When I said this is just who I am, Jesus said to me through the scriptures, deny self. That's so I believe that we are all born that way, whatever that is for us. I think murderers were born that way, liars were born that way, rapists were born that way, everything. Because we're all born that way. Because we're born into sin and we're shaped in iniquity. And that's why we have to be born again. And that's the Christian answer to that question. And that's really the only answer I can give. Other than, I also believe that we are all born with a desire for same-sex intimacy. And I don't mean sex. Sex and intimacy are not the same thing regardless of what culture and society has impressed upon anyone's minds. We go to the mall, we see intimate apparel, and that sure seems sexual. But intimacy, the true definition, is a close familial and or familiar bond. In the scriptures, I see intimacy with Jesus and his disciples, with David and Jonathan. So as a young boy, my father took his life. I didn't have that male bonding, that validation, that intimacy that I desired. And that opened me up to a lot of things. And then culture and society taught me that my desire for same-sex intimacy was really just a same-sex attraction, meaning that it had to be romantic and or sexual. And so I just kind of went along with it. I think a lot of these things are impressed upon us. I think that even for myself and for all of the thousands of people that I've met and talked to and counseled and been and befriended, that all of them have said the same thing, that once they accepted that they were same-sex attracted, that they drew a line in the sand, and they really tried to, or truly believed, that there was nothing for them beyond that line. And so for me, my being rescued or saved and becoming a Christian just kind of wiped that line out of the sand, letting me know that there was much more available to me and for me. So I agree that we are born that way. I just don't agree that we're born, or that we were created or designed, I should say, to be that way. That if it had to be legal and it had to be something that was available to them, then yes, I would say that it shouldn't be available to them until their puberty is complete. Because puberty is not a disease, right? Puberty isn't an issue. It's natural. It's normal. It doesn't need to be paused or stopped or blocked or anything.
Okay.
Said you got the procedure, like it would bring you like happiness and peace, like that's what you thought. But then you like had conversations with some of your close friends and like heard their stories. Like, do you think if like you didn't talk to them that like day, do you think you would have like decided to go through with like the procedure?
I do, and I think that I probably wouldn't be here now, honestly, because I was already depressed. I was already. I mean, when he said to me, all of my life I thought that if I could just become a woman, I'd find peace, joy, and happiness. I completely related to that. Because with every step of transitioning and every step within that world, that was my idea. Well, I'm going to be happy if I do this, and then I did it, and maybe I have to keep transitioning. Maybe I have to keep going further and go further and go further. I'm going to find peace, joy, and happiness somewhere down this road. But come to find out, it just wasn't an option for me. So no, I don't believe that if I had went and got the procedures done and the operation that I would have been happier. I think I would have been worse off, and I probably, or most likely, wouldn't have been here today.
So I know you said that like your personal anecdote and your friend's personal anecdote said that like this like being trans is like really hard on you. If somebody else's personal anecdote said that like it personally helps them and like made them feel better about themselves, or like, you know, somebody being gay was like the happiest that they had ever been, how do you feel about that? Do you think they should be like, if they said they are the happiest they've ever been, do you think they should be like converted back, or should they be allowed to like quote unquote stay as they are?
So again, I don't tell anybody what they can't do, right? I just want people to know that there's other options for them. And I do remember in my process of transitioning those moments of euphoria or joy, right, that were slivers of it. And again, everyone that knew me thought that I was happy and content with and living my best life now. They all thought I was happy. And that was the facade that I put on. I didn't live a lie, I became a lie. And so I think that there's a big difference, and in people thinking that somebody else is happy because they said so, and somebody actually truly being happy and maybe letting their guard down once and saying, I'm miserable, or I don't feel so happy. But it's a prideful issue at times where we don't want to admit our wrongs, or we don't want to admit that there's something else going on, or we don't want to admit that this and that happened to us to lead us up to where we are. I mean, so there's so many different avenues of the reasons why. I mean, I have friends that claim the identity of homosexual. We go to lunch, we talk, they know where I stand, I know where they stand. I don't love them any less because they continue practicing. I just try my best to be an example in word, in deed, and in action. Transgenderism and this whole TransQueer movement that I think people need to understand is it's not just those that are suffering with gender dysphoria that are pushing and promoting this TransQueer movement, this agenda. It is those who suffer from what's called paraphilias, or sexual deviant mental issues. It's those who suffer from what's called AGP, or autogynephilia, that fall under this TransQueer umbrella. Those are the ones that are pushing. So these perversions that have affected so many different people, and I can tell you this, as a former transgender prostitute also, at 14 years old, I was on wrong sex hormones, lived on the streets of Philadelphia, and I was a trans prostitute. And I had clientele who were very influential, very powerful men, politicians, judges, lawyers, CEOs of some pretty big, powerful companies. And these men of power, these influential men, were perverted. They would come to the hotel room, and when they removed their male clothing, they had on female garments, women's garments, undergarments underneath their male clothing. Sometimes it was even like their wife or their daughter's undergarments that they were wearing. This is the depth of the depravity of the people that are making bills and passing bills and pushing this agenda through the system. What's pretty fascinating when you actually do a lot of research on the TransQueer movement and the agenda is that Big Pharma funds all of the trans rights activist organizations as well as the trans medical clinics. And so like the question for me was, why does Big Pharma want to fund all of this? And it's because they're creating medical clients for life. One of the questions that I got not long ago was, well, it was a man, and he says, I says, no sir, and he says, well, I'm a ma'am. Why won't you use my pronouns? And I looked at him, and the only way I could explain it to him was, I won't use your pronouns for the same reason that I wouldn't sit in the sandbox and play with a schizophrenic's imaginary friends, because I can't bring myself to partake of your delusion. At this point, I don't want anyone to have to suffer not one iota of what I've had to go through or what other detransitioners have been through. And there are thousands upon thousands of detransitioners out there. There are thousands upon thousands of ex-gays out there. They don't all jump on social media platforms and start giving testimony and providing their stories, but they are out there. I can look back and say, wow, I can see when all of this happened. I can see when my first teacher molested me and told me that it was natural for boys to engage in that type of activity. It was okay. I can see all of these things. I can see how I was targeted, how I was groomed, how I was desensitized, how I was victimized. I can see all of these things clearly. And then as as I move along with ministry, I get to connect with people who are detransitioning or questioning. And these people tell me of their disorders and their depression and their suicidal ideation. And they tell me of their traumatic experiences and their weaknesses and how they were groomed and how they were fooled and tricked to believe that they were trans or that they were in that under that umbrella. The trans identity is a mental disorder, and all of the different people that fall under that trans umbrella do suffer from some type of mental disorder. And I'm not saying that they're all crazy. I'm saying that they have some type of disorder. It's a traumatic experience, or it's underlying issues, comorbidities, whatever the issue. But there's always an underlying issue. And that's why I push so hard for people to understand that if you're going to love somebody that falls into this category, that you have to love them to life and not love them to death. That you have to love them enough to want to find out what happened to them or what's going on with them, or love them enough to want to help them through it, instead of saying, I'm just going to sit in the sandbox with you and play make-believe, and I'm going to encourage your confusion, and I'm going to promote your delusion, and I'm going to celebrate your issues, your traumatic issues most likely. But I feel like that takes us way off track of just being good, decent human beings and wanting to see other people be healed.
Contracted AIDS through and that you were cured from it. AIDS is very famously known for not having a cure. That's why the AIDS epidemic was as detrimental and catastrophic as it was. So I'm just curious, like, how you were cured from it if we have no cure.
Okay, so in a medical field, a cure would be a pill or an antidote, right? I was touched by the hand of God, and when I had no immune system, they measured that through your T cells. So my T cells were 0, and my viral load was in the millions per part. And so within weeks, my immune system returned to normal, and my viral load was undetectable. So they could not detect the virus in my system any longer. So in the medical field, in the scientific world, I should say, they don't consider that negative. They consider it undetectable, because really they have no answers of why or how it happened. I'm not the only one that it's happened to. There are many people out there that it's happened to that have completely went undetectable. Now, I personally have had some anonymous tests done at different clinics across the nation that tested negative. And so I happen to say, like, no, there's no physical cure for AIDS, but I'm most certain that there is a spiritual cure for AIDS and for any other disease and illness as well. I mean, when I was radically saved from my deathbed, for 2 years prior to that, I hadn't walked without a walker. I couldn't stand up straight because of the osteoporosis. And so my osteoporosis has also reversed itself. I had diabetes, it's gone. I had many other issues that were gone, and I had the nurse practitioner sit in front of me and tell me that I was a medical miracle and that the doctor wasn't going to come into that office because he didn't have a scientific explanation for what had happened with me.
Why do you feel like we as a society tend to highlight what you would consider the sins of homosexual individuals versus just other sins in the Bible, like people who have narcissistic traits, who are liars, who gossip? Like, why aren't we also talking equally about these if sin is evil?
Well, and I do actually. Most of the time when I go speak at a church, I give my testimony, and then I kind of remind them all about gluttony and greed and pride and all of the other things, and lying and deceit and fornication and cheating on their spouse and all of those things. So it's not that everybody doesn't. And I focus on my testimony. You know, there's a passage in the Bible that says that they overcame him, meaning that the church, the saved, overcame the devil. And it says by the blood of the Lamb, the blood of Jesus the Christ, and the power of their testimony. So the power of the word of their testimony. And so I take that literally. And ever since my conversion, ever since I was rescued from this world, that's all I've wanted to do, is get out and give my testimony, because my testimony not only gives hope to those that are trapped in those things, or to the loved ones of people who are trapped in those things, but my testimony also allows me to go into churches and speak to ministries and to people who claim Christianity, and to teach Christians how to love on and embrace people who think differently than them and look different and act different and dress different. Because that, to me, is the only goal. Like, my only goal, I ain't gonna start crying now, so don't get all happy on me, but my only goal is to be available for people, that they would get to experience more in life. Look, homosexuality in my world is a sin, but it's not the only sin I was guilty of. Right? So it's not the only thing that anybody should have been addressing to me. And I remember I used to represent nightclubs on the floats in the pride festivals, and I remember being on a float in Philadelphia, and we passed one corner, and there were all of these people, and they had signs about you're going to burn in hell and it's a sin, and they had Bibles and they had bullhorns, and I remember looking at them and just shaking my head thinking, ew, I don't want to know that God. But then I got to the end of the parade, and we were all sitting there, and there was a group, an organization that was a part of the parade that called themselves a church. And I remember that they walked up to me and they said, don't you let them people in that corner get to you, because God created you just the way you are, and he don't make no mistakes. And as they walked away, I remember thinking, I don't want to know their God either, because their God, if he made me this way, he made me confused. He made me delusional. He made me born in the wrong body, which is what I believed at the time. So I didn't want to know that God either. And so I guess I'm just blessed in the way that I can relate to people from all sides of that whole situation, because I once was a part of all of those situations. And my only goal isn't to tell people what they can't do, is to tell them what they can do and what Jesus can do for them. And if they want that, it's available to them. If they don't, I'm still there for them. And I'm still going to support them, and I'm still going to embrace them, and I'm still going to be there